the electron-anti-electron pair, which eventually give birth to all of the dual particles in the material universe. So what he found was that if you could become one with the field of pure, he called it negative. You have to become negative to enter the field. If you were a positive, it would spit you out. If you were a positive negative, it would spit you out. It would not allow a duality to exist inside of it. That's the point. But he found if you became one with the field and you entered it, he actually said this, that particular particle that you're entering into the field would be anywhere it wants to be in zero time. It explained Einstein's spooky action at a distance. That non-duality in the quantum universe was following the laws of all the teachings of Jesus and Buddha and all the great masters. I wrote about this in my book, Singularity. I wrote a whole book on this. And the only place you can get it is at lulu.com/David Sereda. It's called Singularity. But anyway, what happens here is you end up finding out that when you parallel Dirac's discovery with the teachings of non-dualism in Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and even the Old Testament, where God warns us not to ever take in the polarity field of good and evil, or you'll die, what Dirac actually discovers is perfectly consistent with the way the particles behave in relationship to this field is identical to the teachings of all the great masters. That just try to see this in a state of peace and love. A state of peace is a state of no violence, no conflict. And as soon as you have a conflict, a conflict can't exist in a state or a field of peace because it's a conflict.
Right.
So it falls, it spits it out, just like Dirac says, a polarity field. As soon as if you're in the singularity and a polarity field is formed, the sea of pure negativity spits it out.
They're not
it will
compatible.
reject it. It will not allow it to exist.
Yeah.
So if you look at the fall from grace the same way, as soon as you take in conflict, good and evil, you can't exist in the oneness of God. You can't exist in the singular field because now you want to be this conflict. You want to be the guy whose religion is right and the other guy's wrong, so you can fight. And you can say, oh, God is great, I'm going to go blow you up now. That mentality is the illusion.
Do you think that
whole thing?
Do you think that was something wrong? That let's say that a few humans then at that time were kind of responsible for this, or if this is a symbolic thing. I don't know in what context you want to kind of approach this, but do you think that is something wrong, or was this necessary for our development at the time as a species? I
think it was. It becomes very clear, like in the Apocryphon of John, Jesus, when he shows John the history of the creation, that in the beginning of the universe, the monad, which is the singularity of God, always existed, was never born, never died, doesn't need to be born and doesn't die because there's no aging in singularity. And then this supreme form gives birth to the Sophia, or feminine aspect of Christ, God consciousness, and then it gives birth to the Christos, the masculine. And they always existed in this realm, and they give birth to gods and angels and a myriad of billions, probably, and trillions of great beings of light. And then the duality, the first God who took in the knowledge of good and evil, falls out of the singular field, and it gives birth. It becomes the king of the demigods, and it gives birth to a woman and the female aspect of itself, and they in turn give birth to hundreds of millions or billions of demigod goddesses, right? Who are all in the polarity field, and they in turn give birth to the human species on our planet and probably millions of others. So you end up finding out in the long story that taking on the polarity matrix field eventually leads to an incredible enlightenment and evolution.
Right.
Because it allows you to have a physicality, a form, and a structure. So in the beginning, because you egoically identify with the polarity field, your version of what is good and what is evil is always going to be different than your neighbors and even your own wife or husband if you're in a relationship. And you'll see that the reason people fight is they think they're right and the other person's wrong, or you're not seeing this correctly. I'm seeing it correctly, but you're not.
Yeah.
You see, we waste all of our energy that way. So what I'm saying is that when we finally attain access to our singularity point, that the way the mother and the baby rabbit communicated with each other instantaneously is because they're in love with each other. And love is a state of union and peace where there's no conflict.
Mm.
When we're in a state of love with our partner, we're like, I am with my wife. When we're in a state of love, we're blissed out of our minds, laughing, having a beautiful time with each other, loving each other. But when we get egoical, you can end up having huge fights, and some people even get divorced because they don't get along with their spouse.
Right.
Well, what I'm saying is that the discovery of Paul Dirac is a perfect form of evidence that the singular field exists, and that the experiment with the mother and the baby rabbit and Einstein's spooky action at a distance is proof that it exists. Now if we learn how to not take our viewpoint so egotistically against the other and see that every person has a refractive, different kind of interpretation of the car accident or what's happening right in front of your eyes or what happened 10 minutes ago, we're all seeing everything differently. And it doesn't make either of us right or wrong. It just means we're different.
Yeah.
And that if we stop fighting each other and we stop fighting ourselves and we gain access to that singularity point, if we know how to tap into the singularity, we're going to be able to see a distant star system in real time. We're going to be able to communicate over any distance instantaneously. And we're going to be able to stop aging, cellular aging, disease, and death, not because we have some chemical formula, but because we end up finding out that the true cause of aging at the atomic level is the polarity field, and that we will eventually conquer that.
Wow.
And then we'll build spaceships that are made of atoms that can go from polarity, matter, solid, into the singular field, jump into the singular universe. There's no resistance, which is what Paul Dirac found, so there's no inertia because there's no polarity. You need a polarity to have inertia, which is resistance to movement. And then all of a sudden you can disappear from the physical universe, which is what I think these super advanced UFOs are doing. They're accessing the singular field, and then they can, from this point of singularity, you can see any point in the physical universe you want to, and then just say, okay, I want to be there, and boom, you're there.
Yeah.
So they're not using propulsion, ultimately. They're using this, they learn how to use singularity. Right now, imagine that we are separate from singularity, we've lost contact with it, in ourselves and in the atom itself. But when we're able to access it, we're going to be able to do anything. Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas, if the two in a house become a single one, you tell the mountain to move and it will move. That is incredible. He's telling you that you can move whole mountains by attaining singularity. You can move anything. You can every miracle, walking on water, walking through walls, doing anything becomes possible when we attain this.
Fascinating. And I know that you wanted to talk, David, a little bit about 2012. What's your tie-in? Is there a connection here between what you have been talking about now and 2012, do you think? Well,
when I was taken out of body through those seven heavens, I went in 1986 on December 22nd and 23rd. I went through all the way to the doorway of the seventh, which is like a huge membrane in the galaxy. And I really believe that those seven heavens I went through I was getting closer and closer to the center of the galaxy. And you see that most of the major religions of the world, for example, the Hindu Bhagavad Gita, which is a masterpiece, describes three major arcana of planetary dimensions. And inside of each of those three arcana, there are, I believe, 9 bands of dimensions. So the Gita describes the outermost planets as being the planets of war, where people are still trapped in the polarity consciousness. The second 9 belts of planets are the planets of the demigods and goddesses, which are planets of amazing pleasure, sexuality, and food, and the bodies of those, Buddha describes them also, the bodies of these beings last for, many, many thousands, 70,000 years, 35,000 years. And Buddha even said, in fact, when I was in India with the Dalai Lama, he said, if you should ever come upon a demigod or goddess, you'll be taken aback, but don't worship them as the supreme being. They appear far more advanced than we do, but they're just demigods and goddesses. Well, the next, major third has 9 belts of clear light or enlightened, super enlightened realms, and that's where you eventually reach nirvana. Now, I believe every galaxy has these three different zones. And the outer, if you look at our galaxy, our solar system and our planet Earth is right at the 1/3 mark on the outer rim. Which, if you drop that on top of the model I just described, we're in the last warfaring planet realms, where there's not war all the time, but there's still war. And as our solar system orbits the galaxy every 250 million years, it's slowly moving to the next third, and then when it completes the second third, it will go into the last third.
Okay.
Our planet is right on the border of 1/3 going into the next, which I believe our planet is about to make a shift into the second third, which is the realm of the demigod goddess realms, the planets of great pleasure. And vibrationally, the closer in the spiral geometry, which is what the Milky Way galaxy is, the closer you get to the center of a vortex, the higher the frequency gets. So I believe, and I experience this, that there are these giant membranes between each of these 9 major arcana, 9 major dimensions inside of the 3 major arcana. And the membranes actually protect the previous dimension from being flooded by too much cosmic energy, too much consciousness, and too much light, and too much power.
That's a kind of a
like little protection.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Otherwise, you would, if all of God's entering the universe flooded every atom and every level, that it would just be overwhelming. No one could bear it.
Right.
These membranes exist as protection. So I think we're about to cross a membrane. We're about to, our planet, which in the book of Revelation in the Bible, which was written by the disciple John in the island of Patmos in Greece, he received these revelations that there's going to be a new paradise Earth at the end of this great epic. And I believe the new paradise Earth is Earth going into the paradise dimension.
So this is not something that happens in increments, but this is kind of a shift that happens fairly quickly then, I guess.
Yeah, when you cross, it's happening in increments, but once you incrementally get close enough to the membrane, you cross and you go into a completely different dimension of energy. And I think our planet is going to go, which means that the dark or the fallen angels who believe in conflict and war, are going to lose dominion over this planet.
Okay.
And our planet is going to go into the jurisdiction of the demigods and goddess realms, and there may be a war with the fallen ones and the higher gods.
Well, exactly.
Goddesses over the earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're going to try to keep dominion over it. I mean, this is an incredible planet, but they're not going to be able to because it's been in this dimension for probably millions of years, literally millions of years. And so that's my prediction. Now, whether that happens on 2012, I'm not sure.
Right. It
may even be later than that. I sure hope it does. If it looks like the signs in astronomy predict that our solar system every day is spinning around the galactic center at thousands of miles an hour, and at the equator, our planet is spinning at about 1,000 miles an hour. There's 24 hours in a day, and there's 24,000 miles around the Earth at the equator. So we're moving incredibly fast all the time. We're constantly in a different part of the galaxy. We're space travelers already, but now I think this prediction of John in the book of Revelation is probably what is going to happen. And like I said, Earth is going to go into a paradise dimension. Earth will become a paradise. It will affect the atoms of every human being when they cross into this dimension. And I don't believe that beings of war or war consciousness are going to be able to survive in this higher field that we're entering.
This is interesting because what happens if we connect this with the idea that you elaborated on a little bit in From Here to Andromeda, where I think you kind of laid forth the idea that we need to get off planet. Isn't that right? Yeah, I think that, either there's going to be divine